We start with agenda item number 1, which is any apologies.
Chair, we've received apologies from Councillor Martin Holland.
Oh, thank you, Gary. Yeah, no other apologies, right? Want to remind about webcasting? Moving on then to agenda item number 2 is declarations of interest. Anybody with a declaration of interest? If so, they'll be on page 5 and 6. There is the papers to fill in. Moving on to agenda item number 3, which is urgent matters. Notice of items which, in the opinion of the chair, should be considered at the meeting as a matter of urgency pursuant to section 100B or of the Local Government Act 72. I've had no urgent matters put before me.
Confirm we've had no urgent matters asked to be brought to the committee.
Thank you, Gary. Moving on then to agenda item number 4, which is the minutes to receive the minutes of the Corporate Governance Committee meeting. I'll change that to Governance and Audit Committee meeting held on the 28th of July 2021. Pages 7 to 18. Just go through the pages first of all for accuracy and then go back for any matters arising. So page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Paul?
Chair, matters arising.
Yep.
Page 12. Last bullet point, item 8. It says certain staff are required annually to complete the annual declaration. I think this is declaration of interests. Does that apply to members, whether elected or co-opted?
Gary will come in.
The issue in respect of members is that under the Code of Conduct, members are required to register their interests within, I think it's 21 days of becoming a member, and then to notify us of any change in those interests within 21 days of the change. So that's a continual requirement for members and co-opted members. So the those issues would not relate to members directly because they're already bound by the provisions of the code.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Chair, there was another point I wanted on page 13, if I could.
Yeah, go on, Paul.
Last bullet point in the middle of the page. Members raised the need for a training session to be arranged for members, an effective audit training session. I mean, with the elections in May next year, is that likely to happen?
Lisa, can you help with that one?
I mean, in my view, it's been overdue for a long time.
Hiya, yes. Good question. I will pick it up with the person because there was someone, Prion Thomas from SIPFA, or previously with SIPFA, was arranged to deliver training in person, and the idea was that we'd be able to offer something virtually, perhaps. Apologies, it hasn't transpired as yet. I will pick it up with him and see if there's something that can be done, especially given that there's a couple of new committee members that would benefit from the training as well, I'm sure. So I will make sure to pick that up as soon as possible.
Lisa,
yeah,
can I suggest that it might feed into the revised thinking about the makeup of this committee in the future as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Cheers, Lisa. And the last page was page 17. Any other members have any items you want to bring up on the minutes? No. Could I have a proposer that the minutes are correct? Thank you, Paul, and Reese seconded. Thank you. Moving on then to agenda item number 5, is the annual corporate health and safety report. We're on pages 19 to 70. To receive a report by the corporate health and safety manager on the health and safety management within Denbighshire County Council during 2020 and 21. Is that you, Jerry?
It is, Chair. Yeah, I'm here.
Nice to meet you, Jerry.
Yeah, from a distance.
Chair, sorry to cut across you. Did you want me to just do a quick introduction before Jerry comes in to do the detail?
Thank you, Julian.
Yeah. Sorry to cut across you, Jerry, there. This is the annual update, which hopefully by now you'll be becoming familiar with into the performance of the work of the corporate health and safety team and our management of health and safety within the authority generally over the last 12 months. I'll let Jerry go through the details of the report, but just to say it contains a glossary of terms, an assessment of 3 key areas, and you'll see there that in terms of our implementation of systems and working with the employees that come out as a medium, and how we've dealt with COVID as a high. And also, and I'm sure Jerry will go through this in a lot more detail, you'll see that the sliding scale of where we stand in terms of on the range from, it always amuses me this, from pathological to generative, and we're sort of at in the upper middle range at calculative. And I'm sure Jerry will give you chapter and verse as to what that actually means, but it shows we're on the right trajectory up the projections, and of course it does include some detail on the statistics in terms of incidents. Those will, for obvious reasons, due to lockdowns and people working from home, have dramatically decreased last year. But all those figures regularly go to the corporate health and safety committee anyway. So that was just a very quick canter just to set the scene. So if I can ask Jerry to take you in detail through the paper, please.
Thanks, Julian.
Thanks, Julian.
Okay, Jerry.
So yeah, so the first part really is it's my assessment of Denbishire's health and safety performance in terms of really the way the culture works. And I've assessed it as a medium assurance using the internal audit matrix that they have above. Because we see a lot of good stuff out there, and clearly there's room for improvement. It's an ongoing, ever ongoing process of improvement with health and safety. And even when you get people up to speed, you've got to keep going back and keeping them where they are. So it's pretty good, and it hasn't moved from previous years. The COVID one, however, did focus people's minds very significantly. And I think Denbighshire did very well in the way it responded. And that kind of gets reflected in, I mentioned later on that the HSE did some audits. Some were physical audits in schools and the others were telephone audits. And the outcome of all those really supports my view that we did particularly well. We put all the right things in place at the right time. If I move on to the summary, so the culture has been gradually improving, and the reason I believe it's improving is we've been focusing so much more on engagement and involvement of frontline staff and on behaviours. So why do people do things wrong? It's not always about them just doing them wrong because they can't be bothered to do it right. It can be about the information they're given, or the equipment they're given, or the time they're given even. And focusing on those things and getting their buy-in to the process tends to drive the process forward and making it better. So when we look at the chart a bit later on, you'll see that I've put the position we're in it, and it really hasn't moved very much. The positive notice it's not gone down, and it's kind of stayed where it is. The reason we did so well with COVID is health and safety management is a very broad ranging subject, with a lot of things to think about. With COVID, we had one thing to think about, and that is preventing contraction and transmission of the disease. And therefore, it was easier to define what we had to do. You might not think so when you look at all the guidance from all the different bodies. Initially, it was all in line, and then gradually over time, they went their own separate ways. And we had to pick the bones out of that quite a bit. But in the end, my view was we went with Welsh guidance and HSE guidance, because the HSE is the ones who are going to measure us, and the Welsh guidance is clearly based on a fairly common approach across the UK. But I think we did particularly well in all of that. It forced us, COVID forced us to work differently, not just us as a corporate health and safety team, but the organisation in its entirety. So many things had to change, which really, sorry, someone trying to ask me something. No? Can everybody hear me? I've been having problems with Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm based in Kevendale Healthcare today, and I've been having some problems with the connection. So if I cut out, please let me know. So the new ways of working for COVID would be really helpful in going forward when we're looking at the new ways of working in Denbighshire, because COVID kind of forced us to do some of those things, which meant the preparation and the activities for those activities needed to be put in place fairly early on, which is what we did. And we saw a lot of other people doing it. We as a team managed to keep in touch with people by a massive reliance on Teams, technology in general, Jabber, phone calls and email, and only going out to places where we felt there was no other option than to go out. So occasionally we did need to go and do visits, although they were massively reduced to what we normally do. Again, in summary, the accident incident count, which I'll go through later, you'll see a massive decrease, which is only to be expected because people weren't in work. And throughout the financial year, we had no formal investigations of our ridders from the HSE, which indicates they had no concerns in what they were seeing and what we'd done. They did ask us a few questions about one of the hand down vibration incidents, but it was a fairly light touch, and they were happy with what they heard, and they went away smiling, which is quite unusual. But in terms of hand down vibration, it is important, something we've identified, it is important that the emphasis remains both for managers and employees to recognise what we're doing and why we're doing it, and taking it on board. It's going to keep people safe, but also it's a legal requirement, and if we don't fulfil those duties, we will end up in a bad place. And for the HSE at the moment, hand down vibration is a real area of focus. And I get a lot of feeds from all kinds of places, the safety and health practitioner, the HSE websites and others. And there's been a significant number of prosecutions in the last few years relating to hand down vibration. When we were investigated about 2.5, 3 years ago now, we got a clean bill of health from the health and safety executive, but the only way to maintain that is to keep the focus on what we're doing and not allow it to lapse, which is quite time consuming for our team if the people we're trying to monitor don't play their part. So it's an important message that management support what we're doing and help us drive the process through and maintain its purpose. So in terms of safety culture, you'll see on the model there, it's a model that I've used for a few years now. It's from an organisation called Latitude Production, and it really, this organisation focuses on natural management, natural leadership styles, as opposed to the more forceful autocratic ones maybe. And it's about involving people and getting their understanding. I'm a strong believer in behavioural safety techniques. It makes a massive difference to the way people think about safety and other things. So if we were in the pathological range and we got found out, they would lock us up and throw the key away. So I'm just really pleased we're not in that position. Reactive would show an indication of an organisation that is really struggling with safety. That probably isn't doing enough. When you get to calculative and proactive, you're kind of above the average, and you're doing the right things. You're thinking about it more than not. You can see a lot of where we are is mainly in the calculative area, which means we have the systems in place and we do manage hazards, but some areas need to do a bit more forward thinking and a bit more planning. And there are some sections that are in that proactive range. And being realistic, getting to this generative, i.e. the perfect world, even world-class manufacturing organizations would not claim to be in that area. It's a really nice place to be, but unlikely we're ever going to get there, to be honest. So the improvement is evident in many work areas that we go to, and we go to everywhere within Denbighshire. But I've just named a few where we've seen some real improvements, which are schools, community support services, Denbighshire Leisure, and waste management and collection. So many areas are relying on what they have in place and are a bit slow at preparing for the next step. In other words, thinking ahead. And there's very few that are purely in the reactive area, which is good. Although some of the teams do tend to react when something goes wrong, which is kind of pretty common around the UK. We see a lot of that. So there's definitely room for improvement. There always is, there always will be. We're never going to get perfection, but it's something we strive to get as near to as we can. But it is comforting that we haven't got anybody in the pathological range. We wouldn't want to be there. And if we did, I would be coming straight back to senior management with that information. So I'm quite pleased we've got none of that. So I'll move on now to points of note during 2021. And clearly COVID is the most obvious and the clearest thing that we've had to deal with. And as I indicated previously, because we're focusing on basically one subject, I think the organisation responded and prepared very well. And you can see where I've put us there. I just think we did really well, and the HSE kind of concur with that in the fact of the way they dealt with their surveys of us that they did. So we put the risk assessments in place. We followed what the bodies were doing. We responded very quickly to changes in guidance, and we as a team put ourselves out. We put out some templates to help people. Within our teams, we did have some exemplars, and I've just mentioned a few of them there. So schools were in the press a lot. And it was a big struggle for schools to manage COVID, and the guidance changed a lot, often, and in sometimes quite significantly. And as we started getting mixed messages from the UK government and the Welsh government, we had to try and find what was right for Welsh schools. And so in North Wales, GWER developed a template that we initially used for the school risk assessments. But as reviews started to come along, because they'd use an Excel spreadsheet and the method they'd used to develop the risk assessment, it became very complicated and unwieldy for people. So we redeveloped a Word format that would be easier to review. And so all our schools, every school, carried out a COVID-19 risk assessment, as was their duty, but they all shared them with us. We organised that through the education team, through Geraint. And we reviewed every risk assessment and we made comments. We don't validate them, obviously, because we don't know the particulars of every school, but we give our opinion, our view, and make some suggestions. The template that we ended up with is available for you to see as Appendix 2. And if you want me to go through it at some point, if somebody asks me that question, I will do. But our template is there, and you can see the kind of main thought processes, which are all based on the Welsh guidance and the HSE requirements. Because however we spin it, a school is a workplace. So HSE requirements are something we have to comply with. So the school leaders as a group have performed, I thought, particularly well. There was nobody let us down in that area. And the school support services was a driving force, and we used them to coordinate any of our responses and anything that was coming and going. Another team that did particularly well in quite difficult circumstances was the waste management and collection service. Because we had people going off and we had mixed messages on the guidance. So what we did there was, there's an organisation called WISH, which is the Waste Industry Safety Forum effectively, and they put out UK best practice. So we followed that in our advice to the waste management team, and they followed that, developed their risk assessments and safe systems of work, and reviewed them regularly. Initially, there were a few murmurs about what was being done, but when you're following guidance and it's an unknown science, really, it was to be expected. There were a few murmurs about consultation and communication as well initially, but we helped them overcome those. So there was lots of consultation with the unions, both at not national level, at Welsh level, and within people who work for the organisation. Another example that we saw was the return to work preparations by the community resource teams in community support services. Quite difficult for them because they work in many different buildings that may or may not be owned by Denbighshire, often Betsy Cadwallader, and they were working with people from Betsy Cadwallader. And Betsy Cadwallader have their own way of doing things, and Denbighshire has its way of doing things. And the trick was to find the common ground and put something in place that worked for everybody and ticked all the boxes, keeping people as safe as we could and complying with the guidance. Many other teams, of course, did contact us. I've just named a few there, but we had a vast array of risk assessments, safe systems of work, questions coming our way, and we supported every way we could. For office work, a generic risk assessment and safe system of work were put together so that when people were going back into offices, whichever office it was or whichever team it was, they had the bones to develop their own specific risk assessments and safe procedures that would fit in line with the Denbighshire way of working. One thing that did keep cropping up was the discussion about face coverings and face masks. And I had to go to great lengths in the end to basically spell out that there is a difference. And the difference is, for those who don't already know, the face covering, which is what the requirement is in public places, a face covering is not to protect the wearer, it's to protect other people from the wearer, and it is not classed as personal protective equipment, whereas face masks are personal protective equipment and are designed to protect the wearer. And so they're two very different things, but the names were getting transposed all the time. And you know, even we fall into that sometimes and call them the wrong things. But it was important that the message was clear so that people understood what was actually being talked about. So everything we did, we reflected HSE. So we always talk about the Welsh guidance and the UK government guidance, but we have to remember we're talking workplaces, and the HSE is the regulator, and it was important that everything we did met their expectations as well. So everything we did meet their expectations as well. And I've already mentioned about the number of audits they carried out, and they identified no issues. In the summary, I kind of touch on hand down vibration. So we've carried on doing the monitoring throughout the period. It's been a bit more difficult because we've been trying to convince people to do it from a distance quite often. We've had three new people being diagnosed with HAVS, hand down vibration syndrome, or carpal tunnel syndrome, and they tend to be from historic use rather than current use. The monitoring has just identified the problem, which is why when the HSE carried out their low-level investigation of only one of those cases, they agreed that it was more historic than it was occurring in Denbighshire. So they took no action, and they were quite happily went away and asked us to carry on doing what we're doing. But just to reiterate again, it's important that we keep the pressure on, really. We've got to keep monitoring. We've got to keep people buying into it. We do a lot of talking to the people who are wearing these devices, which are basically like a wristwatch, telling them what they're there for, why we're doing it. And it's about keeping them safe, stopping them from developing hand down vibration syndrome or carpal tunnel syndrome. That's the purpose of it. But of course, because it's a monitoring device, there is always some concern about Big Brother watching, and it takes a lot of communication and convincing sometimes, and we've just got to keep doing it, and we do need support of the managers in the areas at any given time where we're monitoring. So next on my report, I talked about investigation reports and significant projects that we've been involved in. And I've just given a few examples there of some of the things that we've been doing. Some of them required us to go out into the workplace. I mean, you can't do school traffic management from a distance. You have to be there and see it and understand what's going on. Where other things we can do from a distance, some of the project advice, for example, we're able to do from a distance. The accident incident stats, just a very short summary there for you to show the difference between the 2019-20 stats to the 2020-21 stats, with a significant reduction, which is only to be expected, considering a lot of people weren't in the workplace. The number of RIDDORs went down from 32 to 22, and virtually all of those, apart from the hand down vibration ones, virtually all of them were 7-day lost time accidents, which means it could be a very minor incident, but someone might have a muscle sprain or some other reason where they can't return to work for 7 days or do their normal duties for 7 days. I've then given a breakdown really of how our teams operated over the last year, and it just kind of shows you that COVID has really taken over what we do mainly, but we've had to carry on focusing on other safety issues, and we've done that where necessary. Anything we see significant, we'll still get involved in, but COVID clearly took most of our time away. And then following that, I've got a little bit of a table showing what our plan is for this coming year. Hopefully the COVID involvement is going to reduce as things continue to improve, we hope. Only time will tell as the country opens up again. No doubt more reactive work responses will come in as people return to work. We always monitor accident incidents. Every accident and incident that's reported through the system ends up on our desk the following working day. So everyone gets looked at, and then we take a view as to how much we're going to do about it. Hand down vibration monitoring will carry on rotating where we monitor. Schools monitoring, we're currently doing school traffic management, and we're yet to decide what to do with other areas, although we're putting together the question sets ready, but it's about how we're going to carry that out. So rather than audits, we do assessments, and we usually pick a couple of subject areas. So it might be designing technology, PE, might be educational visits, and we look at the way the systems are set up in the schools. And in previous years, one of my colleagues has gone around and we ask a series of questions, and we may ask for some documents as a bit of evidence, depending how comfortable we feel with what we see. So we've yet to decide which areas to do this year. And then secondary schools, we have ionising radiation in there as part of science. So I've had 2 of my team members have been trained now as schools radiation protection officers. Although it's not a statutory role, it's kind of an expectation, and it's somebody who sits in between the radiation officer in the school and the radiation protection advisor, which is a bought-in service through CLEAPS, which is the schools consortium, which is used throughout the UK. Excuse me. And that's a continuous monitoring program anyway. And again, there's questionnaires which we use, which come from CLEAPS. And that is one thing that the HSC are also keen on, is schools radiation. Driver training and plant training. So we still have Jason in our team, who basically his full-time job is to do these things. So not only has he been doing them, and he's had to do them face-to-face, because again, you can't do driver assessments from a distance, and plant and equipment. So where people have still been using plant through the pandemic, they've still had to be trained, and we had to find a COVID secure way of doing all that. And Jason's been doing it, and he's done very well with it. Health and safety training, we've continued to do some of the lower level training sessions where it tends to be subject based, and that's been done through e-learning. But we're hoping in the very near future to start doing full face-to-face training for our bigger courses, and I've listed some of them below. But as I've illustrated there, the distance learning for health and safety, there is some limited value in it, but what you can't get across is culture and passion and of true understanding, and you can't talk about individual anecdotes from a distance. People don't engage the same way electronically. So the sooner we can get back to doing face-to-face training, the better. We've been updating all our sessions, putting them into the new Denbighshire format, refreshing the information, and we're about ready to go once the instruction about work from home where you can is changed. We don't want to put people in the awkward position, or ourselves, in being in work when we don't need to be. We also continue with all our health and safety committee meetings, and there's a few of those, and we go to some operational groups as well. And we provide support, and it helps get the message across to people, and we're able to put our behavioural approach spin onto the things we talk about. In the past, we talked about the action tracker. It was something that was actually driven by internal audit. When it was identified that when we go to places, or we're doing investigations, or we're doing a project of some sort, we may identify an action and an action owner, and we'll inform those people, but we've never had a system where we've been able to follow that up. So IT have developed this action tracker process for us, which is effectively a closed loop. So we can raise an action, nominate an action owner, set timescales on it, and then the system will monitor the responses. And if there is no response, it sends reminders. If action completion dates go over, it sends reminders. It also goes to the line manager of the individual who's the action owner. And if it continues not to be actioned, we can change the action owner to the line manager, who's their line manager will now get involved. So it escalates the process. And because of the number of people in our team, we've not been able to do that efficiently, but this system, it seems particularly good, and we suspect other sections will be using it sometime soon. And I have to thank ICT for the work they did in that. They did a good job of it, and they listened to what we needed and gave us what we needed. We provide guidance for the workforce, and we continue to develop that, and we continue to review what's already in place. So we changed all our guidance starting around about 2016, where we made it very practical. We're a very pragmatic team, so we remove a lot of the background information that was traditionally put into these kind of documents, where people are trying to cover the backs and saying, I'm saying this because of. Well, we don't say that anymore. We just give the guidance that we believe to be correct. So it cuts down the document size, it makes it clearer, and there's more chance that people will read it and follow it. Continuing professional development. To be a full member of my team, we expect people, or we need people to be chartered members of the Institute. And to do that, we need to do continuing professional development. It ensures standards remain, and it ensures that we're communicating with other people around the UK, and we're keeping up to date with changing in health and safety legislation, methods and technologies. And I'm getting on a bit now, so we're looking at the development of staff. I'm 68 next week, so we're thinking about, you know, I'm going to be going sometime soon, and maybe we need to start thinking about who's going to take over. So we're trying to build people up in the team, and hopefully somebody there will be keen to take on the role. Keen might not be the right word, but nevertheless, somebody might want to take on the role. So that's me finished on the report. Would you like me to go through the accident stats? Or are you happy with what I've done? I'm happy to go through anything that I've talked about.
I think we've all members all got the stats there, Jerry. I mean, thanks for such a detailed report there. It really does go into detail, and as you say, you know, COVID has played a major part. Let's hope them numbers stay low when we get back to normal, you know.
On the stats, you will notice that I've done the last quarter, and they are starting to go up, as we would expect as people return to work. I mean, the biggest change, to be fair, was in Denbighshire Leisure. So on the annual stats, you will see there's virtually none in Denbighshire Leisure, surprisingly enough, because it was closed. But now it's opened again, you'll see the numbers gone right up. But that's not an unexpected spike, that's expected, and there's nothing unusual in what's going on there.
Thanks, Jerry. If you open it up to members, if members got any questions for Jerry? I'll bring in Tony, Tony Flynn, all the way from Dubai.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Welcome back. Yeah, hi, Jerry.
Hi.
I was just wondering, we seem to have a situation within Denbighshire where an awful lot of our senior people are leaving their positions at the moment. And I'm just wondering, with so many people at the top leaving, could this have any sort of implications to the systems, you know, the health and safety systems at all?
It's a good question. It won't make any difference to the systems, because the systems are kind of driven by me and my team. We work out what needs to be in place. What it may change is the corporate support from the higher level, and that's always key. So I have a head of service who's the health and safety lead, so that's Steve Gadd, but clearly he's not a health and safety professional, but he is very supportive. And as long as there's somebody at that level who's supportive of what me and my team do, there'll always be a voice at SLT, CET, and corporate committees. And I've not seen any degradation of that to this point. And if there is, believe you me, I would be making noises about it, because I've got a lot of experience with the HSE, because I used to work in manufacturing, and I know what they expect. And they expect senior management to be fully involved and engaged in health and safety. So I'm always taking that message to SLT. And if I thought that wasn't happening, I would be vocal about it. Does that answer your question?
Cheers, Jerry. Cheers, Tony. Paul, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Jerry, thank you for a very thorough and full report. It must have been very difficult these past 12 months. And personally, I'd like to just say, well done.
Thank you.
I've got one question on, pardon me, on your Appendix 3, and then a comment earlier on. The question is in relation to the type of incidents in the last financial year, and thinking of slips, trips and falls. Now, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, okay. There was a story going the rounds a couple of weeks ago that on the London Underground, there was an increase in slips, trips and falls because people weren't using the handrail for fear of picking up COVID. Question, did that happen to any noticeable effect in Denbighshire? I'm thinking of, I don't know, stairwells anywhere. you know, handrails there, not escalators?
Got no evidence for that, Paul. The number isn't significantly higher than previous years, but you know, gut feel, probably it happened. Not just because of people not touching handrails, but also wearing face coverings. It kind of impedes your vision a little bit. So I suspect it did.
Yeah, that's fine. If it wasn't material, yeah, okay. The comment is in your plans for next year and in relation to the health and safety training program, you make the point that e-learning does not lend itself to behavioral and cultural aspects of safety management. I think that's such a good point, because I think personally that it may not only be just safety management where the behavioral and cultural aspects don't come across. And I just wonder whether from a corporate HR and PAN council perspective, whether there's a message there that e-learning isn't the panacea. You've got to think of these other aspects to it as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have told HR my view on it, and because there was a drive a couple of years ago to go electronic e-learning, and I fought against it quite vociferously, because I do believe what I'm saying. When I do Teams training or Zoom training, when I do any training, I try to do very interactive courses. I ask lots of questions, I give lots of anecdotes, and I ask for a lot of feedback. And however hard I try on Teams, sometimes I feel like I'm talking to a picture. And people just seem as though they don't want to respond. And I understand that, because you haven't got that connection. And when we can do face-to-face, I can wander around the room, I can get people to, they feel you being there, they feel your passion, they understand. For me, one of the most significant elements is this inclusion of the workforce, this buy-in, because if we're just giving them systems, they might follow them while we're there, while the manager's around, but if they think it's not right, they'll do something different. So we want them to know it's right. We want them to have been part of the development of it.
And that can apply to any aspect of the council's activities.
Yeah, any workforce, any activity.
Yeah. I just think it's so important. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Any other members before I bring a member in from outside the committee? No, I don't see any hands up. Merrick, you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Jerry. Thank you again, Jerry. Excellent, excellent reports. Just a few things I'd like to have a bit more information on. In Appendix 3, year 2020, I noticed halfway down, somebody jumped into the van, leapt into the van and on St. Asaph, the street in St. Asaph, and another one had bent across to reach for some gloves and injured their back. And the person who jumped into the van is off for 2 weeks, and I remember the other one, for a week, the other one hurt their back. Do you have a conversation with the workforce later on to discuss these minor problems? I would say we all do it sometimes, but these seem to be things that you could not do if they were more careful. And I wonder whether you've had got in touch with highways people and gone through this with them and say you need to be more careful and so forth. That's one question. And then later on in this year, page 69, somebody fallen through a roof light, gone into roof. That was on the 8th of June in Maesteg Llandegla, fell through a loft hatch to hallway below. Again, would you be able to have a conversation with the workforce to show them that they need to be more careful, because you cannot do anything about the loft hatch, because it's a temporary place that you go up there to, to view things, and then it exits obviously, but it's quite a nasty accident, in fact. And do you look into road accidents when a lorry, county lorry, is involved in an accident and somebody is hurt? Does that come under RIDOR as well, or is that totally separate? There's an accident in St Asaph, a lorry, bin lorry, had an accident. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thanks for those questions, Merrick. So I got 3 questions from that. So if I missed anything, please let me know afterwards. So first of all, yeah, any RIDOR report, we do carry out an investigation of varying depths based on the information we receive on the accident form. So sometimes it might just be a phone call to the manager, and other times it may be a visit or we ask for information. So those particular cases with the back issues, we have the conversation with the manager to find out what the circumstances were. Did something unusual happen? But other people trained in manual handling techniques, because those kind of people are, when did they last have the training and do they need refresher training? And we deliver manual handling of objects training. So if we need to do that, we would do. Although again, at the moment, that's through a team, so it's electronic, which means we can only talk and show them a video rather than be there and physically show them some things. So the short answer is yes, we always do follow them up when it's a RIDOR, and the extent depends on the injuries. The second question about the roof fall, it's kind of the same question, because yes, we do. And a roof fall, we will want to know, a roof fall shouldn't happen. So why did it happen? You know, ergonomic ones can happen no matter how well trained we are. But as you well know yourself, for building control, a roof fall should not happen. So why did it happen? What went wrong? What weren't you doing right? If you fell off a roof, you're not doing something right. So we go and find out what that was. Does it need training? Does it need discipline? Or does it just need somebody having a chat to? So yes, we follow that up as well. And then the final one, road accidents. It depends on the accident. If it results in a RIDOR, we will get involved, we will ask questions, and we will go and find out. If it's purely a road traffic accident with a minor injury, the police get involved in that. So we don't bother, we let them investigate it and go with their findings. But if it's RIDOR, we're obviously interested in the RIDOR element. And the bin wagon recently, is that the one where the tractor hit it? Yeah.
No, another lorry.
Okay,
Another
so
lorry.
we've had a couple then. So yeah, we investigate those, and we involve the fleet manager in them as well.
Ah, right.
And we have a road risk advisor in my team, Jason Ballard. So anything to do with road issues, he will go and get involved. So on both those occasions, Jason will have had input. And of course, on the accident form itself, the manager has to have an input, and they have to say what they've done before it even comes to us in the first place. And usually our first question is, you said you're going to do this, have you done it? Or if you say they're not going to do anything, why are you not doing anything? Because there might be some circumstances. So we look at every specific circumstance. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, diolch yn fawr iawn, Jerry.
Yes, thank you very much, Jerry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Thank you, Jerry. Before we move on then, Gwyneth has got her hands up, and then we'll move on. Thank you, Gwyneth.
Thank you. Mine's very brief, but I just wanted to say hello to Jerry.
Hello, Gwyneth.
And to praise him. Jerry, in my opinion, is one of our very, very best officers, and we've always been able to turn to him. So whenever you are going to retire, then we will miss you, but we miss not seeing you in the flesh now. But thank you for all of your work.
Thank you. It's only a single door, this, so don't say anything else. I won't be able to get out.
Okay, thank you, Gwyneth. Well, thank you again, Jerry, for this report. Very detailed. And thanks very much.
Okay, thank you then.
Moving on then.
Bye.
To agenda item number 6, the annual fire safety report, pages 71 to 78. To receive a report by the fire safety manager on the property health and safety team's annual work on fire safety programme and performance. Who's taking that one forward?
Me, Dawn Jones.
Dawn?
Again, Chair, if I can just very briefly introduce before I hand over to Dawn. This follows on very nicely, obviously, from the last report. It's another element of our safety work that we essential safety work that we need to carry out. Again, this is our annual update in terms of the programme and performance of the fire safety team. Dawn will take you through the detail in a moment. But it details the different types of fire risk assessment that we have to undertake, and then there's some detail on some of the key performance indicators. And again, this is an area which initially in the first half of the year was affected by COVID, but we were able to make up the ground in the second half of the year. So very brief introduction there. I don't want to steal Dawn's thunder, so over to you, Dawn.
Thank you. Okay, so this will be my first attendance, my line manager attendance year. So my question is UK. So basically, I got report to compare to.
Sorry
Hello?
to intervene, Dawn. Could you turn your video off? You're breaking
Oh,
up.
sorry. Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
How's that? Is that better?
That's smashing, thanks.
Oh, is it? Okay, good. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just get my report. So basically, obviously, things have increased since in the last 12 months because I've done a big push to get all the fire risk assessments, the FRAs, caught up with because of COVID. So we had a fair few that had delayed. So looking at that. We've also had another member of staff, Holly, who joined the team, and she's been helping me with the appointments because basically initially I was chasing for appointments and doing all the admin work as well as going out to site to carry out the fire risk assessments. So at the moment, myself and Holly have a meeting every Tuesday to go over assessments that are due, appointments that have been cancelled, we need to review, anything we need to chase up. And we're generally working on a 6 to 7 week schedule. We're working ahead of the schedule by 6 to 7 weeks. So at the moment, it's working well. It generally means that whatever appointment I've got in the database system is working and that we can keep to those dates. We don't generally get any sites that say, oh no, it's too short notice, we can't meet for those dates. So to be fair, the 6 to 7 weeks is generally working, so we're going to stick with that. Obviously, we do get some cancellations, unforeseen circumstances. We've had a couple in the last 2 weeks, but they're generally, I'm waiting for new appointments to be booked in, and one of them was due to a bereavement and things like this. So it's, it's not anything we can predict. So then the categories, I think these were discussed last year, but basically we have categories 1, 2 and 3. The 1 is every year, and number 2 is every 2 years, and the third one is every 3 years. So the highest risk are our care homes and schools, so they'll come up every year. Obviously, due to COVID, Darwin and Cuscotta were delayed. So we did do a desktop audit over email to check their paperwork, that sort of thing, but we couldn't physically go to site. They wouldn't allow access. I have since visited Darwin, and Cuscotta was booked in, but they've had to cancel this week. So I am waiting for a new date from them. The fire service also did a desktop audit for Cuscotta, and they were happy. So that was during one of the lockdowns, so that was fine. Let's have a look. So also I'm working with housing. Currently the housing section come under the every 2 years, and I just cover the common areas. So the landings, anything that's beyond their front door of the domestic property. Things will change slightly. After Grenfell, some of the Fire Safety Act coming in. So I'm working with housing on finding out whether we need to move the category from category 2 to category 1. I've got a meeting with them this afternoon. We're still waiting for guidance from Welsh Government as well. Some of it has come out, but it doesn't specify exactly that they want you to do it every year. So it's something we're working on. So I will update as that goes on. But I preempted, and if we do have to bring them from category 2 to category 1, the intention is that they will all be brought up to category 1 within the 2022-23 year, because obviously adding more in means I have more sites to do every year rather than them blended into 2 and 3 years. Okay, so I can update that as and when if anyone needs anything extra, but at the moment we're just waiting for extra guidance from government on whether or not they specify or whether or not we take the decision ourselves. So another area on housing was that we've identified an extra 28 sites which are common areas. So once again, landing staircases within the common areas of multi-occupied buildings. So I have added them to the system under category 2 currently, and I've scheduled dates in for all of them so that they will have been carried out by the next financial year. So by March 2022, everything will have had a current fire risk assessment. And basically all my fire risk assessments go on our database system, which is TechForge. So anyone has access to them, well, whoever has access to TechForge, obviously. Let's have a look. So the next bit is KPIs. So on the report, I've used the same principles that we gave last year with the numbers. So for the last 12 months, the numbers obviously will stay as a total of properties of 168, but from next year, they will show the extra 100, be a total of 197 with the extra properties that we've identified in housing. So from here, as you can see on the KPIs, we're pretty much it was from about November, December, we started getting back into the green. I did put a big push because we did look at deadlines of December, and at one point it looked like that it wasn't going to be possible. But then I gave a big push, and I did more than 1, 2, 3 sites a day, sometimes where I could, to get them all assessed and then bring them back up to the 100%. And then the latest was July 21, and there was one site let me down. So I went down to 99%, unfortunately, but that has since been completed. I was there a couple of weeks ago. So pretty much 100%. I have currently got 2 sites that have postponed or delayed their visit because they prefer I visited an education site when there's no pupils, which is fair enough. So that has delayed. So I have at the moment for this month, I have 2 which are overdue currently. And I think that's it from me. If anyone's got any questions, sorry if I've rushed through. It's new to me, and it's one of those.
Okay, Dawn, thank you very much. Thank you for the report.
Okay.
Things there, members. Members got any questions? I see Paul has got his hand up, and Reese. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Dawn.
Hi.
Couple of questions. You've put down in your report key priorities for fire
yes.
safety 2021-22.
Sorry, I have.
Where did they come from?
They're basically, as we're working through the programmes and looking at what we can develop extra, and obviously Holly's new to the team, so I'm looking to get her up to scratch with what I do. So because at the moment it is generally only me that does this job, so if anything happened to me or I was on a long holiday, there's nobody covering my role. So the idea is that Holly will attend some extra training, and I have started to take her out on site with me as well where I can. And then the other key priorities are identify available options. Oh yes, so we have looked at this previously, and there's nothing obvious that we currently have in place for completing the fire risk assessments digitally. So at the moment I go and paper copies and I take photos, and that's how I work on the previous year's assessment. So we're reviewing in that way. So we're looking at a digital format for it, but at the moment we haven't actually got anything. So it's a bit to look at forward. The review and improve current recording allocation of actions. So as Jerry talked about with the action tracker, this is something Tom Booty's asked me to liaise with Jerry on for what they've developed with the ICT department. Because currently we have a system where we document all our actions and we can follow them up. It's just the format in which they're on the system. They're not as easy to filter or to report on clearly. So we are looking at that as well. And then the training program. During COVID, a lot of the training was done digitally, video, links. We've got a link from the previous firefighters. which we've been using. So generally, that's where the priorities have come for this next year. So
Okay. I mean, one omission, if you will, that's puzzled me
okay.
is that given staff turnover and changing systems, I was looking to see whether you would deliver training to staff over the use or not of fire extinguishers.
Well, the corporate health and safety team used to do that, but there is a question over budgets and whether this will continue. So that is another item that we are looking into, which is with the facilities team, because they currently do firefighting equipment training for civic buildings, but they don't do it for across the council. So it's something else that we need to look at as well, whether or not we provide this, how it works, because the firefighting video we've got does cover that aspect. It just means you're not physically practicing with them.
And presumably there's a contract to make sure that the fire extinguishers have been checked and tested and all the rest of it.
Well, that's what the in-house team do from facilities. John Dixon's team, I think it is at the moment. They currently do that if the schools have signed up for the agreement.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Rhys.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dawn. All very reassuring. I'd like to go back to something that was mentioned by Paul earlier, that some of us on this group are very new members on this group, and therefore you must excuse the questions we ask. If we ask the obvious questions, it's because we haven't had the training yet. I was going to ask you what the it's gone off my iPad now, KPIs were, but key performance
indicators.
Indicators. Okay, thank you. That shows the depth of my knowledge on this subject. So thank you for
Sorry.
that. I'd like to ask you two questions. I think the answer to the first will be no, and the second will be yes. That's just a hint for you. As corporate. The council is corporate parents for looked after children who are in foster care and very often placed with kinship carers who may be elderly and so on. I presume that the inspection of those properties is not something that's included in this because they're not council properties. That's the first question. The second question, if they're not included here, I presume that it's in children's services that those records will be kept, because will make direct request to the fire and rescue service for those fire checks on those properties. So thank you, Dawn.
Okay, so for the first question, the answer, you're right, is yes. They're not DCC buildings, so they don't get included, I'm afraid. If they were a Denbighshire building and we have Denbighshire staff, then yes, we would include. And you did cut out a little bit, so I'm going to guess on some of what you said to do with the children's services and the fire risk assessments. So if they're not a Denbighshire building, then the landlord is responsible. So it depends. Are they domestic properties then? Is that what we're talking, like the children's services? So they are domestic properties, yeah. So the fire rescue service for the fire order does not include domestic properties.
No. Okay.
So yes, it's then generally down to the landlords or the owners of the buildings.
Yeah, my second, I'll put my camera off. The second question was then presumably there has to be a record of this because our looked after children will be in school that are inspected and then they go home to kinship carers or foster carers. So presumably that is dealt with children's services and they will have records of the inspections of those properties.
I would, because it's domestic, it's very different. It's the school would have an assessment, but not necessarily domestic property because it's somebody's home. So as in what children's services, how they inspect the property, I don't know if they would include for fires elements or whether it's general safety of the children. I'll be honest, I haven't got 100%
Okay.
on how that
Okay.
would work.
Okay, thank you for your answer. That's a perfectly good answer. It may be a question for another meeting at another time, but thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you.
Steve has put his hand up. Steve Gadd. Maybe Steve has an answer to your question, Reece. I'm not sure.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to suggest that I try and find an answer and report back to the Chair. I can ask, we can ask Shrian, Head of Children's, exactly what I'm not sure, to be honest, what checks on the house for foster carers, etc., are done, or what levels. So I'm sure we can get an answer to that question.
Okay, Reece.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve.
Tony Flynn's got his hand up there. I know Tony.
Unmute, yeah. Yeah, I think you'll find that foster carers do have checks. We have checks. We have fire checks, and they are pretty comprehensive, and it goes right throughout. So from car insurance to make sure you have to give you a copy of your car insurance every year. You have sort of fire checks. So it is pretty comprehensive. If that's any help.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, Reece.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tony.
Ellie, you wanted to come in?
I think I might have got the wrong end of the stick here, everybody, and you'll have to crown me when we do meet together. Dawn mentioned about virtual visits. Now, is it just for schools or is it for the housing estates? I just don't know, Dawn. I didn't quite understand. And like Reece, I am new to this.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Thank you for your question. The virtual visits were just generally through the lockdown, and the fire service would normally have done some visits with them since the lockdowns have eased. So they just generally did that, especially for the care home during the lockdown, because they generally visit once or twice, once every couple of years, especially to high risk areas like the care home. So no, it's not what we do all the time. It was just a one-off to cover for this incident with the pandemic.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you.
Okay, Ellie, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from members of the committee before I bring members from outside the committee? No? Okay. Merrick, you want to come in?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Dawn, for the report. On page 73, about fire risk assessments, there's 168 buildings there but is it true that inspectors of the different buildings, if it's a food outlet or county building or any building, that the inspector has to keep an eye on the risk assessments, fire risk assessments that they have in a file, and to make sure that if there is any change, that they contact you to lessen the workload, because I don't know how much inspection private people do, even when they've done the assessments, but I think that we're very thorough, and thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Merrick.
Okay, so for Denbighshire, I'm in-house for Denbighshire buildings only. So anything to do with retail or leased properties, such as valuation and estates, it is up to the tenants. It's their responsibility to undertake their fire risk assessments. And as part of the lease agreement, they are supposed to send us copies. So I'm working with valuation estates on that for a future project as well, to make sure that they're regularly sending them in. And for schools and the sites that I cover, the fire risk assessment is supposed to be regularly reviewed by the building managers or the head teacher, whoever the responsible person is. And if they need advice, they need me to come back sooner than my annual visit, then I certainly do. I go or provide advice over the phone, whichever it needs. So yeah, pretty much most sites are very good at contacting me if they need help. Lovely deal.
Thank you, Merrick. Thank you, Dawn. Okay. Thank you, Dawn, for the report.
Super.
Thank you. If we move to the recommendation states that this is for information only. But if I could take members back to the last agenda item, the corporate health and safety, I missed the recommendation. So the recommendation is that the committee notes the contents of the attached corporate health and safety report for 2020-2021. And I think we've done that. Okay, thank you, members. Moving on then to agenda item number 7, which is the draft statement of accounts, pages 79 to 226. To receive a report by the head of finance property, providing an overview of the draft statement of accounts 2020-21 and the process underpinning it. I think, Julian, you come in first of all.
Yeah, very, very briefly, Chair, on this one. Yes, I'm sure you'll remember that we reported back to you that in order to accommodate both ourselves and Audit Wales timetables, we were going for the extended deadline for this year's accounts, which meant that the draft ones had to be submitted by the 31st of August, with the final approved accounts in by the 30th of November. To that end, today is the day when we'll be presenting the draft accounts, and then they will be coming back. I'm not quite sure what the timetable is. Anyway, so that you can sign them off formally before the 30th of November to allow us those to be submitted to Welsh Audit. So Steve is now back, I can see. So I'll hand over to Steve now, who will take you through the detail of the report.
Thanks, Julian. Yeah, I'll keep my camera on, but just put your hand up or shout if I'm lagging or whatever it is. Thank you, Julian. Yes, so normally we'd be coming to this committee in September with the final statement of accounts. You know, they've had the summer to peruse the draft and ask lots of questions. So obviously we're sort of a cycle behind. We go with pepper to chives.
We're losing you, Steve.
Yeah, I thought might. Yeah, it's not working very well at the moment, I'm afraid. Sorry for that, but it's always worth a try. Just so you know, I'm here anyway, and I'm dressed appropriately, etc. So, yeah. So I brought a paper in July just to explain the circumstances around the delay. You know that it's obviously it is a cause for concern going forward. Some bits that make me feel more confident is we did get the actual draft accounts done within a good time scale. They were actually ready in July. We passed a copy over to Audit Wales, but it wasn't the final signed copy because we couldn't do the group accounts because of delays of receiving the group accounts from DLL. It's their first, their first trial at putting those accounts together, and they experienced some delays, which is not unexpected. And then obviously it's the first time we've done group accounts. So the actual 2nd of August deadline, 2nd of August date of when I actually signed the draft accounts, there was a period of time in the run up to that date where we got on with other things, sort of thing, because we just couldn't finalize the statement of accounts. So I think we are going to bring a paper after Christmas back to this committee to talk through some of the plans for how we're going to do it next year, and hopefully give you some assurance of that we'll get back on track for next year. We might not be able to meet the 31st of May deadlines that you can see on page 80 there, the 31st of May and the 31st of July deadline for the whole audit to be completed. And I'll just mention very briefly, some of Audit Wales's issues. David's on the meeting as well, so he might want to come in or answer any questions you might have in detail on that. But it is a really tight deadline that if we could get back next year to the target of getting you the draft accounts in July and the final accounts in September, I think I would be comfortable with that, as long as if we met obviously the statutory deadlines. In the table on page 80, it does still say the statutory deadlines of 31st of May and 31st of July, which they are, but Welsh Government send out a directive basically saying that if you can't meet those deadlines, then as long as if you put a notice out to say why you haven't and why you can't meet those deadlines, then you can stick to the extended deadline periods. But the statutory deadline still is those original dates. But yeah, so we're allowed to meet those other deadlines. I think it's 24th of November, the next Governance and Audit Committee. So we'll be bringing the final statement of accounts to that meeting. Audit Wales, their resources are really stretched at the moment across North Wales. And that was part of what's happened with the delay. We are just really at the peak, or sort of ramping up to the peak of the audit. So nothing, normally when I bring the draft statement of accounts, I'd mention if there's anything that's come up so far in the audit. There hasn't been anything material, but that's not to say that there won't be, because there's still a good 6 to 8 weeks of audit work that to go. So it's not much of an assurance really until they work. They're likely to be working into the beginning of November is the latest we've heard. So it is, my team are full on this for the next 8 weeks, which is, they'd normally be casting ahead to planning for next year's statement of accounts and helping me with the budget process, etc. But they're still full on with the statement of accounts, which is the downside of not reaching those early deadlines, really. So that's around the process. As I say, the important thing is, I think, that we will be bringing a report back to this committee after Christmas to go through the planning and the thinking going forward for next year. On the statement of accounts itself, on page 84, it just gives a brief summary of the sections, really, which normally I skip over, but it is getting a bit more complicated because of our relationships with other organizations, other structures, and that's likely to continue. And I'll just mention a little bit about that. So there's a narrative report, which I'll go through. Statement of responsibilities, which is the legal side of my role, the role of the audit committee, etc. Then the financial statements, and section 3 is basically our statement of accounts, the council fund statement of accounts. So that's the section that we report on every month in the finance report that goes to cabinet. And that's the core part of the statement of accounts. However, in section 4, you have the supplementary statements, which is effectively the HRA, so the housing revenue account, which obviously a lot of people have a keen interest in, and is obviously very important as well. Now we also have an additional section, group accounts, because we are now technically part of a group. We are the whole shareholder, the only shareholder in Denbighshire Leisure Limited. So what happens is that they produce their own accounts completely separately. They have separate auditors who are currently auditing those accounts. But what we have to do is bring in those figures into our accounts so that you can, any external person can, and internally as well, but they're publicly available so that anyone can see what the financial position is for the whole group, because we are the sole shareholder of that company. So it's important that, it's less important slightly for local authorities because of the imbalance, I suppose, but it's largely group accounts are there for companies, so that a company that has lots of subsidiaries can't hide losses in various different, or profits even in various different companies. You don't see the whole picture. So, it's important that that is done. It is the first time we've done it for Denbighshire. So, that part hasn't been audited yet. So we're confident we've all done it correctly. But There you go. Section 6 is blank at the moment, and that's when Audit Wales will report and give a summary of their auditor's opinion, which will hopefully be just fine and dandy, but who knows. So that will be in section 6. There's blank pages there, so just to explain that. And the other really important part of it is the annual governance statement, which I won't go into detail, but that doesn't mean that I don't think it's really, really important. Lisa Lovegrove brings that separately to this committee to go through, and then we include it in the statement of accounts, but it is really important that it's in there. You know, it goes through all the things around proper governance, anti-fraud stuff. You know, it's really important. Make sure our structures are robust, and you know the audit arrangements are robust as well. So that's the rough structure. If we now just go to page 88 of your papers, or page 4 of the statement of accounts. If you want to point anyone to a section that just summarises the position of the council, the narrative report is quite a good starting point. It does have a link to the final outturn report, which is on the bottom of page 89 in your papers, which goes into more detail of the management accounts financial performance during the year, but it does give a good summary. You know, the picture last year was basically that we received 23 odd million in direct financial help from Welsh Government to pay for the response to COVID, which that's a combination of income loss grant, which largely was Denbighshire Leisure because of this, you know, it was basically shut for 12 months. But lots of other income loss, that, you know, planning fees. We also had funding for council tax yield for the increase in council tax reduction scheme in year last year. And all that expenditure that you've seen in services, so schools, you know, all the PPE expenditure, all that additional expenditure was claimed through that grant. And during the year, you know, it was a troublesome, worrying year where announcements were made. You know, quite rightly, everyone was, Welsh Government and UK Government were planning as events unfolded. And I think it was not until, from memory, it was about the 16th of August, might have been 17th, it was around that time, where we had confirmation that Welsh Government funding would be available for the whole year. And that was really when it was, you know, a big sigh of relief, really. And we thought we will get through this financially last year with the help of Welsh Government. Now, what happened towards the end of the year was that we received quite a bit of funding that we weren't expecting, and that particularly impacted on schools because they were giving money for catch-up funding. Now schools are spending that now. So what you'll see in the monitor, if you go to the monitoring that goes to Cabinet every month, you'll actually see their balances have gone back down a bit, not hugely, but you know, a good couple of million, they've gone back down, and that's schools spending that grant money that they've received, all that funding that they've received last year to help with all that catch up that's required for pupils. So yeah, it was a very worrying year. We put in very early a budget mitigation, a COVID mitigation strategy that went to Cabinet in May, which contemplated the worst case scenario of not having Welsh Government funding and how we'd cope as a council with that. So, you know, it was very serious, but we did get through it, and you can see that, you know, the outturn was fine. And if you have a look at the top of page 89, you know, our reserves are still there. You know, we didn't need to empty the cupboard of our reserves in order to pay for this epidemic, for the impact of the epidemic, which does mean that going forward into next year and this financial year, but for the, you know, budget monitoring, budget setting for next financial year, our balance sheet is still in a healthy position. which, as I say, 12 months ago, we were worried it wouldn't be. So yeah, on page 89, you can see the link to the Cabinet report. Please help yourself. There's a summary of the capital projects and the spend on the top of page 92. And then a few technical issues. There's a few things that are in there every year: summary of our housing stock, summary of our borrowing investments decisions and our role in the pensions. A couple of things just to note is the North Wales Economic Ambition Board, which is another inter-authority complication, which I will be mentioning at the end when we get to the forward work programme, because there are a couple of reports that need to come to this committee for you to review. So I'll be putting that on the agenda. But that does give a summary of their position last year and a link to a report that went to Gwyneth's audit committee, or whatever it's called in Gwynedd, which summarises their accounts, so you can see their financial position. And the same for the AOMB. So that's the AOMB we've had for a long while now, for 4 or 5 years from memory. And we lead on that, so we're the host for it, but it is a separate joint committee that has its own accounts, it has its own audit of those accounts, which Audit Wales carry out. And if you look on our website, those papers are available, but there's a link there to the papers as well in the narrative report. And then just finally to point out, I think, is the local authority trading company, so DLL. And as I said, that's in our new section, which is the section 5, the group accounts. But just to note that that's this is the first year that we've had to do that and bring in that information. I think just to note, and it was mentioned in the cover report as well, the statement of accounts has been publicly available now from the 2nd of September, and it's 4 weeks. So if that's available to the 29th of September. I haven't currently had any questions externally from members of the public, etc., but it is available, as too is the AOMB statement of accounts as well. And I think that's probably all I wanted to cover really, except the only last thing was just thank everyone really for the related parties returns, which we went electronic this year, and with Audit Wales's blessing, we went through the process with them to make sure they were happy. But I have to say, from our perspective, it saved hours and hours of our time chasing up, and it worked really, really well. Well, I hope it's worked really well. We'll see what Audit Wales say at the end, but certainly on receipt of them, it was really, so hopefully that's worked for everyone as well, because that was a really time-saving, efficient way of change that came out of COVID. So we probably wouldn't have been able to get that through if it hadn't been for the changes that we've all had to, the home working, etc. So there's an ever so tiny little silver lining there. I think that's all I want to cover really. The only other thing to say, sorry, is Shian Evans is in the meeting as well. I think she has come to Governance and Audit Committee before, but this is the first time that she's now. Normally, I've been quite involved in the detail on the statement of accounts for the last 3 years, probably 4 years. Now, obviously, this year, Shian has taken the lead on that as Chief Accountant and Deputy 151 Officer, which obviously meant I've been able to concentrate on property matters and the budget process. So it's Shian and her team that have delivered the detail on here. Basically, I just do the narrative report and just check the notes. That's it's a team of people that produce this document every year, and they work really, really hard. And the hours they put in to get this document to whatever the deadline is, the extra hours they work, the leave that they don't take, is it really is a mammoth task. So my personal thanks to Shian and her team, and I'm also hoping she'll be able to answer any really technical questions, because I probably can't. But on questions, if you have any questions, obviously I'm happy to take questions now. I'm also happy to take any questions between now and November, because some of these answers are quite technical. So, you know, probably the best way of some of these answers is through emails, and we can give more detail, a more detailed explanation for them. So I'm quite happy to take questions in between now and when the final accounts come as well, if you'd like. So I'll stop there now. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Steve. I've got I've got Reese and Tony here. Okay, Tony, take your hand down. I've got your mic down. I'd just like to say, Steve, on behalf of the Government Audit Committee, a massive, massive thank you for what's been a real troublesome, you know, not just 12 months, 18 months that you have to put up with. Not only trying to bring these accounts forward year on year, but to go through what you've done. It's a massive thank you from this committee. I'm sure we're all will say that. Reese, you wanted to come in?
Okay, thank you, Chair. If I break up, then let me know and I'll put the camera off. Steve, the Chair has just passed on his thanks. I'm sure that all members are conscious of the amount of extra work you and your department have done during the year, on top of the difficulties of doing what you normally do. I'm sure you've burnt the midnight oil and more many, many times during the year. So we're all very grateful for the
breaking up, Reese.
Thank you. Now,
Breaking up, Reese.
okay, I'll put that off there. Right, Steve, I hope you realize that you're talking to somebody here who gets a headache when he looks at his credit card statement when it comes through the post and sees all the figures on it. So please bear that in mind when I ask you to explain something which is, I'm sure, obvious to everybody else. I'm looking at page 4 of, it must be, it's my page 88, the review of the year revenue expenditure, page 4 of 142, my page 88. Yeah, Steve?
Yes, that's fine. Got it.
Okay, it's not a problem. It's just could you just explain to me, please? There we have paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, paragraph 5. It talks about the underspends during the year. There's a net underspend of 2.705 million, and then it says the underspend of 9.457 million when you take in the funding and schools and so on. And then later on in the bottom paragraph on page 4 of 142, it says that service requests to carry forward underspend amounting to 1.678 were approved in Cabinet. I don't have a problem with it, but could you just explain what that's about and the cause of the underspend and what happens to it? Some is carried forward, maybe the rest isn't. Could you just explain that to me, please? Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, of course. I think probably the best bit to look at is the table on the following. Well, it's actually on page 6 of the statement of accounts, page 90 of the papers I've got in front of me.
Yeah.
And so the total underspend is the 9.5 million.
Okay.
But 7 million of that is schools related.
Yeah.
So they obviously schools, we treat schools differently to other services. They carry forward their own balances. Now, you know, that we do have powers to get involved in those balances. We never have done that in Denbighshire, despite you know, a number of years ago there were calls to limit the amount of school balances, and we always resisted that and explained they will need it for a rainy day, and the rainy day came during the austerity years and they went down, 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 and then unusually we actually had schools with a debit balance, a net debit balance, so basically a deficit position for all schools for a couple of years. Now this funding, as I say, this is 7 million is largely to do with the additional grants that we received from Welsh Government in February, March time. But also there are genuine underspends last year for schools because those schools haven't been open. Now, some of those underspends are energy, because if you haven't got schools open during the winter, so January, February, I can't remember when they went back, but I think it was the end of March, wasn't it? I think. So, you know, for those really cold months, schools were closed. So that did produce savings for schools. We haven't taken those savings. We've kept them in schools. Schools have had the benefit of that. And so too, things like another big saving for schools last year was cover, teachers cover. So because schools weren't having lessons in that formal way, if a teacher was sick, because they were doing virtual lessons, they didn't actually need cover. You know, so cover levels were dropped. So there's lots of reasons for schools. Oh, sorry, NNDR was another issue. We had NNDR refunds for schools, and those are kept within schools as well, unlike other services that we deal with those corporately.
And that underspend will carry over in the school budget to the next financial year then?
Yes.
Or
we
the
have
next quarter. Yeah.
Yes, so schools have been allowed to keep all that. They've been allowed to keep the, you know, it's not allowed because we would have had to have done something unusual for them not to have that funding. So it's the normal course of events that they would keep the specific grants that Welsh Government have given them. And they've also kept the savings, the year savings that they've had, knowing that they'll have pressures over the next 2 years to actually catch up on pupil attainment, etc.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm very comfortable that as Section 151 officer. The other two bits that make that up are earmarked reserves, earmarked underspends for services. So that's the 1.6 million. And that's where services have underspent. And that's largely, again, due to COVID, lack of activity in certain areas, you know, but there were a couple of areas, Emlyn service, for example. We wanted to put some money for destination management. So there's all those, that 1.6, what services are you going to use that for is detailed in the final outturn report, so you can have a look on the link there to see actually, you know, the breakdown, the detail of what the proposals are in that area. But they're very much around recovery from COVID. That was the sort of point in my service, for example. It was around catching up on the repairs and maintenance on our buildings, because we couldn't get into some of the buildings, so we had an underspend. So we've ploughed, we want to catch up that work, so we put forward some of our underspend to try and do that in this financial year, which we're currently ongoing. And then the final bit is that 721,000, which was just what was left. So actually after you take out schools, after you take out those plans for services, our underspend that we could do something with was that £721,000, and we decided to put that in the budget mitigation reserve, which is used to help plan the budget going forward. So to pump prime, invest to save projects, for example, things like that. And that's where that's gone. So that's the makeup of the 9.5.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. You'd make a very good mathematics teacher. I understood all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhys. Tony, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. And Steve, I'd say here to everything Barry said about you and your department in such uncertain times. I'd like to thank Rhys for bringing up that question about the schools, because I was a little bit uncertain. You know, obviously with schools closed, what happens to the money? So I appreciate that. Could I just ask if I could be reminded on the DLL about is the local authority guarantor for DLL, you know, and that comes to obviously the pension fund, and it comes to everyday day-to-day trading. You know, I know they've experienced a few unfortunate issues, but hopefully the insurances will step in. But I was just curious about where we stand as guarantor, or are we even guarantor? Thanks, Steve.
Gary might want to come in on this as well on the actual legal position, but yes, effectively we're the sole shareholder. Ultimately, you know, there's governance arrangements in place. We agree a management fee for the company at the beginning of the year. That is not expected to change. But you know, if that needed to change, it would have to go through the governance arrangements of and we have the strategic governance board, which is the council's way of managing our relationship with our company, if you like. But it would also need to go to cabinet if anything was to change. So it's done on an annual basis. We did make a particular, when COVID first started back in time flies, and it would be March 9, 20, was it 2019 or 2020? God, I can't remember now. It's been going for so long. But in March, when it first started, we made a particular commitment to the company formally, and that was just setting out our commitment to the finances of the company. Now that's because it was a force majeure. Something that actually was so big that the restrictions that are in the contract with the company around the management fee, we felt actually we need to be a bit more flexible here. Because of that, we help them with cash flow all the way through the year. So, for example, we pay the wages and then we recharge the company for those wages. We allowed, you know, we only sent them the invoice when we knew they had the cash to pay it. So we just helped the company with that cash flow issue. Fortunately, Welsh Government, as I say, last financial year provided all the help that the company required through those loss of income claims. So actually, in the end, we didn't have to provide any further help from the council. But you know, ultimately, if the company fails, we would need to step in and tidy everything up and pay for all the liabilities. So ultimately, yes, we are. I don't know whether Gary wants to just say yes or no to that, or whether I've overstepped the mark.
No, yeah, I confirm what Steve said. The council is the only member of the company, and any change to that can only be decided by a decision by full council, because it's a matter reserved to the council. So effectively, the company is owned completely by the council and would be reliant upon the council for funding in any sort of case of extremis.
Okay, thanks for that, Steve. Thanks for that. Okay, Tony.
Chair, it's Graham here. Can I just come in on that issue? Is that okay?
Yeah, come in, Graham.
Delchin Vale, thank you. Just for Steve, really, to clarify something perhaps for Tony and for other members. We talk about, we've created DLL, which is the company, of course, that runs a number of our leisure activities. And we talk about a management fee that the council pays to DLL to balance their books. But of course, Steve, it's right to say that's no different than when those leisure functions were within services within the council before it became a company, because they still had the same level of subsidy. It was just going, if you like, to a service. So in the great world of finance, not a great deal has changed in terms of the money that the council pays towards running those facilities. It's just a structural issue in terms of the way it's set up, but financially, not much has changed. Is that fair, Steve, to say, do you think?
Yes, yes, effectively. I mean, I think the important point is that the company was set up, obviously, to be financially efficient, to be more commercial, and to see that management fee reduce in time. Now, there's ways that our financial commitment can you can see the saving. Now, there's the cash element, so our management fee could go down. We're not proposing any change to the management fee in the foreseeable because the company is still recovering from a massive shock. So, you know, but certainly we're not. Now, there are inflationary increases that it was always planned that the company would grow to be able to pay for those inflationary increases. So unlike other services, they don't automatically get an increase in the management fee for pay inflation, for example. They're supposed to be able to grow their income to cover that. That's the idea of the commercial aspect of the company. So although you might see the management fee stay the same, actually behind that, there's a saving already for the council because we haven't had to pay for that inflationary increase. Now, there might be that we get to a stage where there's some unusually high inflationary increases, which means that the company has to come back to us and say, look, we can't cope with that increase because it's too high. That will go through those governance arrangements that I explained before. It would need to go as a formal request to the Strategic Governance Board. They would need to consider it, recommend it to council, to Cabinet, and Cabinet would need to make that decision as part of the budget process. So there are, you know, there's governance arrangements to alter that, and it would all be very transparent if that happened.
No, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Chair. Just worth clarifying. I suppose my point is members need to because sometimes members might think, oh, we've set a company up and now we're subsidising it. We were always subsidising it in that respect because we were always paying towards those leisure facilities. It's just that previously it was money we were giving to a service to run. Now we're giving it to a company to run those things. But as Steve said, the longer term idea is that subsidy would perhaps reduce. I don't think it would ever be zero, clearly. But that subsidy will reduce as DLL become more commercially active, if you like. But clearly, the jury's out on that, given COVID, etc. They've got to have time to recover from the pandemic. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve, as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Steve. Any other questions from members before I bring somebody from outside the committee? Reese, you want to come back? You're on mute, Reese.
Somebody has to be in every meeting, Chair. I'm on page 106. It's just a request. We have mentioned about training. I certainly feel that one of the things that I find it very difficult to get my head around are revenue reserves, capital reserves, usable and unusable reserves. So should we be arranging training during this session of the council, then could that be included, please? I don't want an explanation this morning, but that's something I would appreciate having assistance with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Reese. Yeah, Lisa, maybe we could note that and have a discussion on it.
Yeah, I've already contacted the trainer, so I'll ask for that to be covered. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Reese. So no more questions from committee members. Gwyneth, you wanted to come in?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and diolch yn fawr iawn I Steve, and we have an excellent officer in him. During the pandemic, when it was at its height, some councils deferred the charges or removed the charges for parking in order to help the town centre businesses. And I noticed in your report, Steve, you talked a lot about income, and so when we talk about car parking charges, it's always said, well, this is a necessary source of income, but it has an impact on the health of our town centres. Is there something from the monies that we have had from the Welsh Government to alleviate the COVID effects? Is there anything that we could do to help town centres? Because they also contribute to the income for our council, and they're very fragile. And in talking to businesses, car parking charges certainly are an issue. Diolch.
Yeah. Okay, Chair. Yep. Diolch, Gwyneth. Yes, just to explain, the grant income that was received last year was from Welsh Government was emergency financial help to cope with the impact of COVID. Now, parking is an interesting one because that was one where at the beginning of the year, I can't remember the dates, but it was roughly the first 6 months of the year, Welsh Government gave us the full recompense for the full impact of the reduction in car parking income. So we weren't charging car parking. A lot of the car parks were closed anyway for COVID reasons, for health and safety reasons, but we weren't charging. Now, and if you remember, September through to it was October, November time, there was this opening up of the economy. They took the view that actually it would be a local decision if we carried on with free parking, and therefore some of the financial help was withdrawn, and that carried on during the year, and has changed. So we're not getting any financial help this financial year for loss of parking income. Now, obviously, over the summer, with the staycations, etc., a lot of our car parks are full. They're doing really well. The income has rebounded, so we wouldn't be asking for any financial help from Welsh Government. Now, the conversation about medium long term, what we do with town centres, I think is a conversation that Graham might want to come in on that. But it is separate from the specific financial help that's talked about in that narrative that we received last year for the impact of car parks being closed and for us choosing not to charge for parking, etc. That was a particular thing that funding is not ongoing. So it would be a local choice. We obviously can make decisions around parking. There is a cost to that, a budgetary impact. But we recognise that reviving town centres is obviously on the agenda for regen, levelling up fund, etc., etc. Graham, I don't know, do you want to say anything around the town centre issue in particular?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I wouldn't be advocating reducing car parking charges because you say we've got budget lines, etc., and that income then goes back into kind of helping to maintain those car parks and making them pleasant places, good first image as people turn up to your town, planting beds, clear signage, etc. And we've given a commitment that that's what we want to do in terms of investing in our car parks because they will support activity in our town centres. But as Steve said, there's a whole raft of work that Emlyn's team is currently doing at looking at how we can support our town centres. And I think there'll be members will hear more and see more about that over the coming weeks and months, partly through Levelling Up Fund and some of those projects, but other projects that are coming through as well. And I think Emlyn has been asked to consider putting on some sort of member workshop or a briefing for council on some of the work that we're doing in terms of supporting our town centres going forward. So hopefully that gives you a kind of brief summary of where I think we're up to. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Chair. Deal.
Thank you,
Chair, sorry, if I could just add one very brief thing just to complete the picture, so to speak. As Steve quite correctly said, in the autumn time when we initially started to open up before the second closure, Welsh Government did essentially remove the support for loss of income from parking. However, we did actually take a local decision in that case, and we extended that period up until the end of the last calendar year. Which was because it was a local choice. It was at our expense, but that for a lot of other reasons, as the Steve and Graham have mentioned, obviously that could only be a temporary interim measure, but we did put that measure in place up until the end of December. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Julian. Ellie, you wanted to come in?
I'm just trying to advise Gwyneth. We buy a parking permit every March time. So we paid it just before the lockdown in March 20. But the good news, Gwyneth, is the fact that we did not have to renew until what I call the big car parks in Real. Oh, sorry, I'll take my video off. Yeah, so that's what's happened. I myself was very happy that we got the extra few months on the permit, but the fact is that the car parks were free from what, April to whenever. And like Steve, I can't remember when all these things happened because it's been a big blur, hasn't it? But I just thought I'd mention, because us in Rill, we do have a few free car parks for people coming in, popping into town. But the thing is, it's good to buy the permit. And I'll shut up now. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Ellie.
Oh, yeah, can I thank Ellie for that? That's interesting. And I think it's something that I can discuss further with Mike Jones.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Diolch fawr iawn.
Thank you. Rhys, there's still a hand up. Is that an old hand?
No, it's a new hand, Chair, and I'll be very brief, and this is the last question. I'm looking at page 102 of the report. And I wasn't going to mention Denbighshire Leisure this morning, but it has been mentioned by Graham. It says the performance of Denbighshire Leisure is scrutinised by the appropriate council scrutiny. The appropriate scrutiny board. I was just wondering what that scrutiny board was. What is it called? Is it a board or a committee?
I'll bring Gary in just to explain.
Yes, when the company was created, the council set up what it's called a strategic governance board. That strategic governance board is chaired by the chief executive and has on it the leader, the lead member for finance, the chair of corporate governance committee, one of the chairs of the scrutiny committees. It has the monitoring officer, the 151 officer, and some backbench representation. I don't have the full list in front of me. I do apologise. I don't have the full list in front of me.
Okay.
That board oversees the relationship between the council and the company, and that board has the ability to refer matters to one of the council scrutiny committees if it feels that that would be merited.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Rhys. Thanks, Gary. Okay, members. Well, David Williams wanted to come in. Audit Wales.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back to some of Steve's sort of opening remarks around the audit timetable, and just to provide some comfort, I guess, to members that whilst this year we are auditing much later in the year, and that's for a variety of reasons, extending from the current sort of pandemic. We do have sort of significant audit resources available to us through October, and it is still our intention to provide to the committee audit of financial statements report in November. So I just wanted to confirm the current timetable for completion of the audit is late October, early November, reporting to the committee at the end of November. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, members, thank you again, Steve, and your team for the hard work that has been done this year, and that's an understatement. To members, the recommendations were to note the position as presented in the draft accounts, and I think we've done that. Moving on then, members, to agenda item number 8, which is support budgets and direct payments follow-up report, pages 227 to 248. And I think Julian, again, is it?
I think Is it me to introduce this
Lisa?
one? Yeah.
It's Lisa.
Sorry, sorry, I couldn't get off mute there, Chair. But
all
yes, I
right.
think I'll hand this one over to Lisa. Yeah.
Cheers.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, just to point out, we have Councillor Bobby Feely as lead member for the service area, Phil Gilroy and David Soley at the meeting as well. But if I just take you through the results of the follow-up audit, and then I'll hand over to the service area for them to provide a comment as well before going to any questions, if that's okay. So the original review of support budgets and direct payments, just to clarify, this is over payments to adults. There was a separate review for payments to children, which has come here previously as well. So this, the original report came to the committee in August 2019, and it was given a low assurance rating. And because of that, the committee asked for progress in completing the action plan. The first follow-up was concluded in April 2021, and that came back to committee and noted progress had been made in addressing a number of the actions in the action plan, despite the pressures of COVID-19 on the services. But there were still a number of actions outstanding. And so a second follow-up has taken place, which is what's presented here. The audit opinion is still showing as medium assurance. There was 4 actions remaining. So if I take you to page 232 of your packs, which is the appendix report, and that just summarises the results of the follow-up in an easy one pager. So the actions that were outstanding, there were 4 in total, but since the report's been finalised, we've just had confirmation that one of those has been completed. There was just some information that we didn't have available at the time before finalising the report. So really that should be 3 now. So and also to note that where there are 2 actions not implemented that were relating to major risk issue, given the number of actions that have been completed, we would consider that to be a moderate risk issue now relating to those actions that are outstanding. So the actions outstanding, so the documented guidance is the key piece. It has been written, it's just being finalised, and then there's some training to be delivered to staff so that they're aware of their responsibilities and following the guidance in delivering their work. The bit around the CIS identifiers on Paris has been complete, so that's the piece of work that we will confirm when we go to do the next follow-up. And the quality assurance tool to check recording practices, well, that process has been established, it just needs to be put in place. So there's good progress with all of the actions, and we are confident that they will be completed shortly. We have scheduled to do another follow-up, and that is scheduled for November 2021. So if I can pass over to the service, I don't know if David or Bobby or Phil want to comment on the actions that's taken place.
Thanks, Lisa. It's Phil. Yeah, thanks for that. What I'm going to do, because David is the operational lead and responsible for support budgets, I'm going to pass over to him to give you feedback. Thank you.
I mean, it just for me to really reiterate what Lisa's just said, of the 3 actions that are outstanding, we're just waiting for an opportune time now to deliver on them. So the guidance has been written, and we know how we're going to deliver the training. But at the moment, the COVID, which is massive.
David, you're breaking up badly. If you could turn your video off. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair. So yeah, things are probably at the most pressured that they've been since March, and so we're waiting for a good time to introduce the new guidance and the training for that. And then similarly with the audit, we've had the audit tool written and co-produced with the teams since last summer, but it will become an additional task for staff, and teams are just far too pressed at the moment. But that said, we have other processes in train where managers authorise care packages, and we've now made the authorisation process slightly more robust than previously. And so we don't need to rely on that audit tool to be safe in the knowledge that what is being done meets all the requirements of the various legislation that we work to.
Okay. Members, any questions? No, all seem happy on that. If we then go to the recommendation, and the recommendation is that the committee reviews the progress with addressing the audit actions and decides whether it requires any further update reports on progress with the improvement action plan. The members require an update. Paul, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, only to say, Chair, that there's still a couple of issues with what were major risks. And I just think we shouldn't forget about that.
Okay, yeah.
We have got sorry, Barry, we have got a follow-up on the 20th, I think it's November.
Oh, I think members happy with that. Yeah, thank you, Bobby. Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, I was going to explain that I will include a summary in my next internal audit update report, or in a future one after the follow-up's taken place. So you will be cited on those remaining actions, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a separate agenda item.
Okay, thanks, Lisa, for that. All members happy? Yeah, thank you. Moving on then, members, to agenda item number 9, which is parking income follow-up report. To receive an update report on the progress in implementing the action plan that accompanied the internal audit report on parking income, which was presented to this committee in November 2020 as part of the internal audit update report. Are you leading on this, Lisa?
Yeah, sorry, I just thought I'd turn my camera on, say hello. Yeah, I'm not sure Mike Jones Traffic was going to attend, and Councillor Brian Jones. So I'll just give them a minute to attend, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay, Lisa.
Helo Lisa, sut wyt ti?
Chi da, a chi da?
Iawn, diolch.
I've just been told by Joel they both had invitations to the meeting. So if they're not here, I don't know what more we can do. Mike is joining now. Oh, hang on. Mike is coming in.
Okay, I'll make a start then. So similar to the previous item, I'll introduce and go through the results of the follow-up report, and then I'll hand over to Mike if he wants to come in and explain what the service has been doing, and particularly the remaining actions, the work that's in progress there. So the original internal audit report on parking income was dated November 2020, and that came to this committee November 2020. It was a medium assurance, but members requested that the follow-up report come back because there were some concerns with income arrangements, and just to get that assurance that those arrangements have been put in place and are robust. So this is the first follow-up review. As mentioned previously, parking income has been affected by the coronavirus, and for a number of months they were closed. So this is the first opportunity to follow up. So the follow-up review identified a number of areas have been completed, 5 of the 10 actions being implemented, and that leaves 5 remaining that are in progress. Just to briefly explain what they relate to, it was in relating to parking income where the expected income level perhaps haven't been received. So it's determining what the intervention level is to investigate any discrepancies. Also to review and implement SLAs, service level agreements, particularly with outside bodies that the council collects monies on their behalf, and also to develop written procedures for reconciliation of car park income, such as parking by phone and new arrangements for payment by card, some of the newer machines that have been implemented. So based on our review, we've given a medium assurance, again, overall, because of the number of actions outstanding. But pleased with the amount of progress that's been put in place, particularly the reconciliations are in place over the cash income, which we tested. We have another follow-up scheduled for November 2021. So I don't know, if Mike, if you wanted to say anything on that.
Borodar, good morning all. So yeah, of the 5 actions that we've worked through, obviously we'd have liked to have done more than 5 at this stage, but unfortunately the pressures put on the service by COVID and dealing with some of the COVID projects has delayed some of that progress. But of the remaining 5, we've put some meetings in the diary to progress those. And just if I perhaps just go through in terms of what we're planning to do on those, just bear with me. So firstly, so I've got notes here, and for some reason it's going a bit, it's just going off the screen, just bear with me. Okay, so firstly, so that there's the one about reviewing the SLAs. So just to explain, we collect cash, for example, for St Asaph Cathedral on their behalf, and they pay us an annual amount, but that's something that's a historical arrangement and just needs to be reviewed and formalised in terms of putting an SLA together for that. So that's one of our next actions that we'll be progressing. And then likewise with Denbighshire Leisure Limited, the Royal Pavilion car park in Llangollen is another one where the car park comes under the demise of DLL, but we empty the car park machines, or rather our contractor does, as part of the same overall contract for the emptying of all the pay and display machines. Essentially what happens is we retain 10% of the amount collected, which equates to for the maintenance of machines, for the cost of actually emptying them, and also for the restocking with blank rolls of pay and display tickets and so on. Then, so again, we're going to review that SLA. Then in terms of other actions, we've basically got, sorry, just going back to my notes here, but we've essentially got the intervention levels that Lisa referred to. So at the moment, while there aren't any causes for concern and actual income received is actually up on what the recorded levels are, we should obviously have intervention levels in place so that if there was any reduction in income that was unaccounted for, we need to have a level, a threshold level, at which point that we'll obviously undertake further investigation. So we've basically going to have a meeting with both finance colleagues and also with audit colleagues just to agree what is at a reasonable level in terms of either being under or indeed being over by a certain percentage as well. Okay, so happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Members, any questions? You all look content? No? And as Lisa has said, there's a report coming back in November, yeah?
We're scheduled to do another follow-up in November, and part of the recipient list for that report. So I was intending to include it as part of my next internal audit update. So it'll be a summary there. But if, any member at any time, when you receive any of the reports that we do, you can always request that they be put on a future agenda if you have any concerns that you want to discuss at the meeting.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you, Mike. If we can go to recommendation that the committee reviews the progress with addressing the audit actions and decides whether it requires any further update reports on progress with the improvement action plan. As you've heard, Lisa will be bringing not a report but an update on hopefully in November. Okay, members? Thank you. Moving on then to thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 10. This is Audit Wales Performance Report, pages 261 to 272, to receive a report on Audit Wales work plan and timetable. Is this you, Dave?
I'll take that, Chair, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay. The audit programme and timetable is a new sort of initiative from Audit Wales to make sure that audit committees, governance and audit committees across Wales are more cited and of a rounded programme of work to keep you appraised of where we are up to in terms of the delivery of that work. So what's underway, what reports have been issued, and what's outstanding to be started. So I'll just run through the report quickly with you. I mean, it starts off with the financial audit work. You can see the detail there. That comes obviously from Matt Edwards and Dave. It moves then swiftly on to the performance audit work, and normally you'll see Dave Wilson or myself here talking about that. So we got some items on there: commissioning older people's care home placements. The draft report's going to be issued in July. It was issued, and we're now heading towards a second draft. It's a quick verbal update on that one. The financial sustainability report has been issued, and the council now has that. The delivering environmental ambitions, the fieldwork is now complete. The draft report has been issued to the council as well for comment. And so on. So as you can see, as we go through this, it's got the the full programme of work, and where I'm able, or where Dave Wilson or whoever is able, we will update you when that comes to the next available committee, because we're going to be issuing these quarterly rather than for committees. I can see their reference to the Springing Forward project. We're just beginning now to talk to councils about arranging the field work for the 2 tracers for that, having withdrawn the survey that we had planned to start at the beginning of September. The work plan then goes on to talk about our local government national studies, the town centre regeneration, direct payments, emergency services work. Again, you've got updates there. And as we move through it, you've also got updates from both Estyn and Care Inspectorate Wales. So I think hopefully that gives you a flavour, a rounded flavour for the work that Audit Wales and Estyn and CIW also do. And again, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions that you have, or the committee have on that paper.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy, and thanks for that. The report sets out quite clearly for us when your reports will be coming. Members, have you any questions for Jeremy? No, you're happy with this? Paul, sorry, you've just raised your hand.
Thank you, Chair. 2 comments, not really questions. At the July meeting of this committee, I expressed a little concern in terms of the forward work programme that we would be getting this quarterly. I think it's a good report, and I'm pleased it's come. And I'm pleased that it's going to come quarterly. But looking at the contents, I'm just aghast at what the impact of the contents may be on our forward work programme. And it just reinforces the need for this effective audit committee training. My question, I suppose, is to you as chair or Gary, what within this report do we need to focus on to make sure that we take account of it in our forward work programme?
Yeah, Gary will come in there, Paul.
And to be honest with you, Paul, I think there's a large program there, and I think in the first instance, it seems to me that if you receive sort of reasonably frequent update reports in respect of the work, then you can make decisions as you go along as to whether there are any specific issues that you would like to have more detailed information on, or which may assist you in identifying areas within the council that you'd like to concentrate on. But it's quite difficult just to look at that list now and start sort of pick individual things out. It may well be that it's worth a separate discussion, if you like, outside of a meeting in order to take a look at the forward work programme, because as you know, the forward work programme of this committee is already it does have the tendency to become fairly congested at the best of times. So we're in members' hands, and if there are items there that members particularly want to have further reports on, then clearly that's something we'd have to try and factor into the work programme.
Thanks, Gary. It's just that it looked a bit scary to me. That was all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Jeremy did want to come back on that question, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, we can obviously help, guide the committee on reports that have got more sort of, content in terms of message, if you like, and things that the committee needs to be aware of, and the reports do vary in relevance, and so we can certainly help guide you. Some of our national studies, for example, wouldn't necessarily be directly relevant to Denbighshire, but we'd obviously want you to receive those kind of reports for information. For others, we could guide you and say, right, well, this one, just have a read of it. It's a really positive report, or this one's a bit of a stinker kind of thing. So let's talk about that in more detail. But we can certainly do that, and we can do that either before the committee or through a pre-meeting or something like that, which of course is always available to you as a committee to request.
That would be very helpful, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any other questions, members? No? Well, moving on then to the recommendation that the committee confirms that it has read, understood and taken account of the work plan and timetable, and has the opportunity to ask for any points of clarification. Are you happy with that, gentlemen and lady? Okay. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Moving on then to the last item you'll be very pleased to hear is agenda item number 11, Governance and Audit Committee Work Programme, pages 273 to 276. Yeah, if I can bring Gary in on this, please.
Thank you, Chair. You'll see that in November, there's an item number 12, Constitution Update Name of Committee, that actually should be around the terms of proposed amendments to the terms of reference for this committee. As members are aware, under the Local Government Elections Wales Act, new functions have been bestowed upon this committee in relation to complaints, etc. So we will need to update the terms of reference, and I've met with Lisa to discuss that. And we'll also be in that report explaining to members the arrangements by which we move to recruit lay members for the committee post the next election, given the requirement for an increased number of lay members. And there's a national recruitment exercise being coordinated by the WLGA, which will be taking place this autumn as well, to assist local authorities in that. I don't know if Lisa wants to add anything on it.
Yeah, Lisa, do you want to add anything?
No, I wasn't going to add anything. I was just going to comment. There's a number of follow-up reports on there. So I was just going to ask committee in terms of the internal audit follow-up reports. I think where they were low assurance and still showing as low assurance, I think it's right that they still come here as separate agenda items. But if they need an assurance, I was just going to ask if the summary as part of the internal audit update would be sufficient, just to try and reduce the amount of agenda items to going through.
Yeah, it is quite big. Would you be happy with that, members? Yeah, yes. That's a yes, Lisa.
Okay, thank you.
And I know Steve has got his hand up.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to be less helpful, Chair. There's 2 reports that need to come to, well, ideally November's Corporate Governance or Governance and Audit Committee. The first one Jeremy mentioned in his update, which is the financial resilience. As Jeremy mentioned, the report is ready. I just need to formally respond with it to the recommendation, which I'll do within the next couple of days. So that should be ready to come to the November's meeting. And the other one is I need to bring, as I mentioned when I went through the statement of accounts, I need to bring the North Wales Economic Ambition Board statement of accounts and the audit just as one agenda item. I think it's for information, and you know, there won't be anyone from North Wales. I think it's really to come to here if you want to then pick up on anything and ask anything. I think that's the case on that one, but it does need to come apparently.
Okay, Steve, thank you. It looks like we'll be here all day in November.
Sorry, Chair, I should just add, so I've just noticed that there is a typo in the January one. It's Queen's Market, not Queen's Marquee. And that we will need to schedule in January, March and April some reports around some of the constitutional changes that will need to be made as a result of the Local Government and Election Wales Act. So we will need to get a group together to deal with that. They won't come all in one go, probably they'll come piecemeal, just because of the nature of the changes, and it may well be that we'll need to do some sort of workshop with members in advance before we bring anything to the committee.
Thank you, Gary. Steve, is that an old hand or is it a new one?
Old one, apologies.
Okay, cheers, Steve. Paul, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think reading elsewhere in the agenda, but I can't remember where, one of the future items should be to do with complaints under the LG&E Act.
Yes, well, that's part of the report that will come in November around the terms of reference. And I think Lisa referred to the fact that we'd spoken to Kevin Robertson complaints and we were looking at a report. I think, Lisa, was it January?
Okay. Yeah, January. So we could pencil something in for January on complaints, and then we can always consider that when the report comes in November about the terms of reference. But yeah, it'd be worth putting that in there.
Thank you both.
Cheers, Paul. Okay, members.
Could I just add? Sorry, there's
yes,
the annual governance statement follow up on the action plan normally comes to committee either November or January. Given that November is particularly busy, perhaps January would be a better meeting for it to come to. Yeah.
Anything else, Lisa?
That's all I can think of at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, then, members. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Thanks very much for your attendance, especially Tony Flynn from Dubai, and also from our Chief Exec, Graham. Nice to see you here, Graham. And
thank you, Chair. Diolch yn fawr.
And always our friends at Audit Wales. Thanks very much. Have a good afternoon.